Welcome to Iowa Pagan News, your informative internet radio station catering to all pagans worldwide. We are dedicated to bringing you the very best in music, news, events, and lots of fun stuff. Come tune into our new podcast at www.plrdn.podbean.com. Now, here is your host, Lou Silverwolf Williams.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Pagan Artist Spotlight on the Prairie Land Radio Network. And I always have to say thank you to my good friend, Virginia Ackley, who has been so kind enough to do the intros for us here at IAPN Radio, and a few others that you're going to be hearing during the podcast as well. And this afternoon, I'm going to be joined by my special guest, Denny Sargent, who is the author of Werewolf Magick, Werewolf Pack Magick, which is a book that we're going to be discussing today that got sent to me by my contact up at Llewellyn. And also he's written a number of other books, all related to the occult. So welcome, Denny. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's really great. I love talking to pagans and expressing all the variety out there. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
No, you're very welcome. Now, yeah, this book got sent to me, I said, okay, he is getting to know my taste in books, because this goes right down my alley. His being part wolf, it's like, I can connect with this.
Excellent. Yeah, I just should note that the first book is Werewolf Magick, and that gives you the history and kind of the sort of basics on how to achieve shape-shifting abilities, which sounds really flaky, but it goes back to shamanism, and it goes back to ancient werewolf cults, and there were many, many of them, and there's lots of historical proof of all of these. And so I stumbled into this when I went through a very bad time not long ago. And really my whole life was in disaster mode, and I'd lost everything, and I was deeply, deeply depressed and upset and completely at a loss. But I continued my daily meditations, which I do every night. And this wolf spirit started showing up. And this is not something that I was ever involved with, though I've always liked werewolf movies and werewolves. And the wolf, was a three-eyed wolf, and the image is on my website, and I painted it actually, and it guided me. And as I started listening and doing some of the practices that it was sort of guiding me to do, go off into the woods and rip off my clothes and find a way to let this primal feral part of me out, what I ended up calling the animal self, which is, there's a lot of ways we can go with this, but I started to intuitively figure out how to go into a shape-shifting mode and remove my upper cortex for a while anyway, and sort of push all the monkey mind, higher level cognitive thinking and endless mental babble, push it down into my unconscious, and let the lower part of the cortex, let what Carl Sagan called the dragon mind, the animal mind, come to the fore and take over. And through trial and error and through lots and lots of research, I kind of hit on how to do this, and would reach a point of being completely in an animal state and not constantly thinking about things, and found incredible freedom and power, like an amazing amount of energy and power, things I could do things that I couldn't do before. So I know this sounds flaky. So I have a master's in history, in ancient history. So I went back and looked to see, like, okay, am I losing my mind? I assumed I was pretty much losing my mind. I mean, that was kind of the point. And I'm howling and running around. I'm lucky I've never been arrested, running around naked in the woods. I still do it in my yard, and I keep waiting for the police to show up, but they don't. So my neighbors, I'm sure, I actually have a funny story about that, but I'll tell you later. But so once I started finding out that no, in ancient Greece there were werewolf cults, and even way earlier than that there were Proto-European werewolf cults that they know about, and they have names for, and often associated with groups of warriors, and in many cultures there were these werewolf cults where people would relate to being wolves or being attracted to the spirit. And then I started researching more animism, and this all connected weirdly, like so many things in the occult do, by the fact that I had studied under a Russian shaman, like a real shaman, not an American, wannabe shaman. These were people from rural Siberia, from the Olchi tribe, and a friend of mine had been bringing them to Seattle to do conferences and workshops at the University of Washington. And I got a chance to hang out with her, and I interviewed her for what was then a thriving magazine, Pangaya magazine. And I got to do workshops with her. Nadiajda was her name. There were a couple of other shamans too. And I got a chance to really understand what real authentic shamanism was, which, as she put it, was mostly a pain in the ass because the spirits never leave you alone. But you're born with it, right? I mean, the animals come to you. The animal spirits come to you. And I've realized that this is what happened to me, this wolf spirit, who in my books, I call the great wolf spirit or whatever. I have a couple of different ways I refer to it, but had come to me and actually literally saved me from a very, very bad ending, I think. I was not in a very good space, and has stuck with me and has been guiding me and whatnot. I also hung out with the shaman in Guatemala who recognized me as an occult person. And at one point we were just sort of talking, and I just looked at him and I said, "You're a shaman, aren't you?" And he looked at me and said, "Oh, you are too." And I said, "Not exactly, but," and then he told me, he had a great line. He said, "There is a great brotherhood around the world and we recognize each other." And I said, I actually have traveled to almost 30 countries, and I recognize magic makers and shamans a lot, and or people who are involved in something, Santeria, whatever. And he told me a little bit more about how the animal spirits come and empower you and women. So all of this started to come together, and I started to piece together my own methodology, because there's not very much left in terms of how shape-shifting works and whatnot. Then, because I'm an initiated witch too, I'm a 3rd-degree Welsh trad witch from New York. I've joined all the cults. I found out that, in fact, a third of witches who were burned alive. See, that's in the first book. I have a lot of stuff about witchcraft in the first book. About a third of the witches who were persecuted and burned alive were also accused of werewolfism.
Now that I did not know.
Or werewolfery, as they said, which I just love that word. But yes, it's probably more than a third. I'm being fairly generous in saying a third, but you will find, I have photos, and if you look it up online, just do a search on images, like old images of witches and the witchcraft trials, you will find a bunch of them showing witches turning into wolves. Then I started, a lot of what I did, the first book was highly research oriented. The second one was more me going all the way with different rituals and ideas and techniques. But what I was surprised at is when I started digging for stuff, I hit the treasure trove of these witchcraft trial documents. And most people are horrified by them, and they are horrible. But as I started parsing through them, going through piles and piles of them, specifically looking for the term werewolf, I was shocked. About more than half of them mentioned werewolves and werewolfism.
Wow.
And that the devil gave the gift of lycanthropy to witches as one of his things, and the devil, of course, was the in my books I call him the Lord of the Forest. But there are a number of specific trial documents that talk about where people confessed, a number of them, but where people talked about joining a coven And the first part of the coven was they would get together and they would do these rituals. But the head of the coven, who they called the Black Man, the Dark Man, or the Lord of the Forest, this came up a bunch of times, this term. The head of the coven would once they were accepted and marked, they then taught them how to be a werewolf, how to become a lycanthropic witch. And it's very, very interesting stuff, because there's always some, like in several of these, there's always some things. One, there's some sort of salve that's rubbed on, some sort of psychedelic is taken in. The witch wears a belt, a wolf skin belt, or wears something from a wolf, ritually dons it, and then he teaches them techniques for letting the wolf spirit come out of them, and people would go into a trance state, unconscious, like almost comatose trance state, and they would leave their body in the form of a wolf. And it's very clearly written in a number of places where suddenly this one guy wrote when he's visiting, says, suddenly I was a wolf, the other witches were wolves, and we started running, but we could not see the Lord of the Forest anymore. We couldn't see the head of the coven anymore. And that's likely because he didn't shift. He was there making sure they were all okay. So anyway, so it's amazing stuff. Like, if witchcraft and lycanthropy are like this. And I was shocked, because I've been a witch, since the 1970s. I was like, I didn't realize that was part of it. I didn't get that in my coven, that's for sure. So it's intriguing stuff. The Greece, where I just, without wanting to ramble too much, where I found the werewolf cults were huge and quite well documented, and historians from ancient historians on had documented and seen this and talked about. People like Herodotus and Thucydides and Heliostus, like a lot of traditional historians, like well-vetted historians, had seen these, had gone to these cultures and seen whole groups of people turning into werewolves at a certain time, usually at festivals. So the earliest werewolf I found was in Mesopotamia, and it's in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The goddess Ishtar turns this person who was devoted to her, who wouldn't leave her alone, praying and offering to her. She turns him into a werewolf, and his dogs kill him, because she wasn't a very nice goddess, I guess. And so from then on, I found in ancient Greece, prehistoric Greece, there's a mountain in Arcady called Mount Lycaon, and it now has a huge temple. It has a huge temple on it that's to Lycaon Zeus, meaning werewolf Zeus. Before that, it was the temple of the god Lycaeus, which was just the wolf god. It goes all the way back. They're still doing archaeological digs there, and they have found evidence that it was a primordial shape-shifting site with possible cannibalism involved, way before the Greek gods and goddesses of the Hellenic era were even popular. So the wolf spirit was still worshipped there. About a mile down the hill, down the mountain, is the temple of Lycaean Pan, the wolfish Pan. So I know it goes. It like these Legos just go on forever. Then, but without going too deeply into it, so Greece, Rome, in ancient Rome, a lot of the werewolf stuff from Greece entered into Rome, but there's lots of Roman historians and stories about werewolves, and most Romans, you'll read, I've studied a lot of Roman history. If you read a lot about Roman history and about Roman folklore, Romans all believed in werewolves, and they didn't see it as a big deal. They just figured, oh, some people can do this and some people can't. And there's great stories, and in Werewolf Magick, I have specific stories from different ancient historians. It's not just me making stuff up, saying that, oh yeah, this one guy, Pausanias, who's a famous Roman historian, Livy is another one who had stories about werewolves. said, "Oh yeah, this I hired this soldier, this Roman soldier, to guard me as I went. I had to at night go to another city, and halfway there, the soldier said, "Oh, I gotta go," and ripped off all his clothes, turned into a wolf, and disappeared.
Oh man!
So he was like freaked out, right? And he kept going and finally found a farmhouse and said, "Hey, there was some kerfuffle going on at the farmhouse, and there was people running around and screaming and yelling." And he said, "I'm just looking for a place for the night." And he said, "Oh, come on." The farmer said, "Come on in." He goes, "We just had a wolf attack, but we threw a spear at him, and we got him in the arm." And to make a long story short, he did his trip. He came back. He went to the house of the soldier who had abandoned him. He was going to yell at him, and he knocked on the door, and he was in bed with a wound. You can only guess where, in his arm.
All right.
And he totally owned it. He said, "Yeah, I'm a werewolf. I attacked his sheep, and they got me." Okay, this is crazy ass stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But there's hundreds of stories like this. Herodotus went to the Nurai tribe, which is in what's now Russia. And he traveled all over, and he documented all the different rituals and everything. He's one of the most important ancient historians. And he watched the entire tribe shapeshift. He said it was on their festival, and they all gathered together, and they all started doing this huge ritual. And he said they all turned into werewolves for a period of time, and then they all turned back. Same story in the Osiri tribe in Ireland. Once a year, they all get together, and they all shapeshift into werewolves for a week. Now, what does this mean, right? Like, and these people are all reporting this. The church in Ireland reported this too. Mm-hmm. And St. Patrick, in fact, had a huge confrontation with another Irish tribe that were werewolves. And in Ireland, the term werewolf also means a mighty warrior, fighter, and it's seen as a positive thing. And St. Patrick was preaching, and this one tribe came up and mocked him and said, "No, we're pagan, we're heathen. We don't want anything to do with your crazy religion." And he cursed them to turn into werewolves. And now the myth is that, because St. Patrick cursed them, anybody who has that blood of that tribe has werewolf blood. Mm-hmm. But the other version, the pagan version, is no, they had always been werewolves, and they didn't care about St. Patrick. So anyway, then of course there's the Norse. Have you seen The Northman, the movie The Northman?
Not yet.
Okay, you're gonna love the werewolf shapeshifting scene, but it's the best film depiction of what my book is about and what I'm talking about that you'll ever see. And it was all historically pieced together. I have a lot about Norse. There's berserkers, which everybody knows, which means bearsark, which means wearing a bear skin. The other kind of berserker was the ulfsark, who wore the wolf skin.
Right. Now I've heard that one. Yes.
Right. And Ulf is often you'll see the names of Viking kings ending with Ulf or beginning with Ulf, and that means they've had the initiation into the shamanic practice of turning into a wolf and just going into battle and being so completely filled with their crazy werewolf animal self that they get air shot and hacked at, and they just don't even notice. And you'll see in this movie, if they do, like, I had like about 10 friends call me and say, "Oh my God, this movie just sold your book." I said, "Well, it was fun. I enjoyed it." Anyway, so there's lots of other places I could talk about. There's lots of other things happening, but that gives you some basic idea of the historical background of what I'm doing.
Cool. I was going to say, because now most everybody would relate to werewolves in the myself. Yeah, I can see the shaman end of it because that's very much been documented all throughout history. And then also, I have to say this, basically it takes me back to the Underworld movies.
Yeah. Well, they did good werewolves.
Yeah, they did. That's for sure. But for me, having the and especially with having a wolf spirit guiding you, uh, that's not a uh, unfamiliar practice, because there are many wolf spirits that are guiding people.
Yes. Yeah. It's so funny because I thought I was alone in this, and then I went to Pantheacon and I met the acquisitions editor of Llewellyn, who I had worked with before, and I had 5 different books I wanted to publish, and so I had proposals.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, they were like, no, no, no. And the last one was Werewolf Magick, which I thought was for them was going to be flaky, and they wouldn't. And that was like, oh no, we want this one. And then I talked to Weiser, and they said the same thing. They said we want Werewolf Magick, and they basically worked it out so that I ended up at Llewellyn. But I thought it was nuts. This wolf coming to me. I've been in the occult forever, but this wolf spirit. I've always felt drawn to wolves. I've always been a feral child. I like running around in the woods. I've always have been that kind of wild and crazy person,
Mm-hmm.
And but this was a true breakthrough. And I just generally how I write my occult books is I get obsessed with something or encounter something, and then I dive deep into it and end up with a pile of paper, and then eventually get a book published. What happened with Werewolf Magick. So I realized that the key to it is to not just submerge your brain completely. You're constantly chattering monkey mind, and just bring up the animal consciousness, which is very primal and just very oriented in play and sex and being full of the sensory input when you're in the woods and hunting and all those primal things. And I realized that a lot of the book you have, the new one, has a lot of rituals,
Mm-hmm.
but realistically most of the trance making state comes at the very end of that book. It has the what's called the praxis, right, which is how to start getting into how to start the shape-shifting process. This book has three different layers. Werewolf Magick. I started with just basic trying to move into that state, and then I went camping in the woods, in the wilderness, and hopped up 2 more levels to the point of true shape-shifting as far as I'm concerned. There is a third way of shape-shifting, which I did not put in the book and I have not done, which is the one I was talking to you about, where witches would go into a complete trance state, a complete like a coma, and take their etheric body. I have a lot in this first book about the double and the etheric body and the actual work that's been done on this, and the idea of projecting your consciousness into your energetic body and being able to leave your body as in the form of a wolf, in the shadowy form of a wolf, right? And this apparently is something was done a lot with witches, and done a lot because I keep finding I've had over and over and over and over again documentation and proof, and people would, like that guy, people would get stabbed as a werewolf, and they would go to their house and they'd be lying in bed with that injury. There's multiple stories of that the body, if you're in a coma and you've left your body and your etheric body is damaged, it's reflected on your body, which never occurred to me, and I thought was completely wild.
Huh. Yeah, I would never have suspected that either. Now, the one quote that you've got here in the book that I can relate to, for the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack, and that's by
Kipling.
Yes, Rudyard Kipling,
Yeah.
from the Jungle Book.
From the Jungle Book.
And I can relate to that phrase quite frequently. Yeah, that's just something about who I am, with the path I'm on, and also, well, as I said at the start here, is that I know that I am part wolf because it goes back to my Native American heritage. So now,
That's powerful. I'm gonna I can make sure that you get a copy of this because
good,
you want this first one. Werewolf Magic gives you the history, the rundown, and then actual ways to move into it. Werewolf Pack Magic reviews all of that and talks about the praxis ritual in werewolf magic is better, deeper, has more things in it. But finding out that werewolfism, that werewolfery, that shapeshifting was a major part of witchcraft and the foundation of witchcraft has changed everything for me. If you're a witch, if you're a practicing witch, and you're not involved or you haven't done any research in this, you're missing a big part of the heritage that came from real traditional craft. I mean, I found it over and over again in the witchcraft trial documents, as I was saying. And I quote, in this book, I actually quote very specific things about covens. You know, of course, the priests were all saying, oh, it's the devil. But they, when you hear how the people who are confessing say it, like the Lord of the Forest and the Dark Man, and they occasionally called him the devil or the Horned One, but it clearly isn't Satan. And it's a major part of witchcraft. And one of my jobs is, and one of the things I really want to do is make sure that people who are interested in witchcraft, interested in paganism, don't poo-poo or neglect this because, you know, Hollywood has made werewolves just a sort of horror trope and rather a silly fantasy. And that, you know, people think, oh, whenever I introduce this, people are like, oh, come on, you know. And I say, I go, then I rip their throat out. No, I don't. I think about it. But I say, look, you know, all these horror movie things are just to make money, but they have a kernel of truth in them, and you should follow that thread. And we don't have a lot of knowledge, true firsthand knowledge about shamanism. Shaman comes from a Siberian term, and there's all kinds of schools and people calling themselves shamans. It's all, and most of it is not of interest to me at all, because I've met real shamans, and that their attitude is being a shaman is a pain in the ass, and it's a major problem. And when I walked around with Nadiajda, she did these things. She looked at me and she goes, people in America want to be shamans? I said, oh yeah, they'll pay a lot of money. They'll go to these things, these special places that claim they are shamanic, you know, institutes or whatever. And she started laughing. She said, it's horrible. She goes, when I was a little kid, the spirit started to come to me, and I ran crying to my mom and dad. This is in Siberia, right? And they're tribal people in the middle of nowhere. And her parents started crying and said, oh my God, no, she's a shaman. It's going to be horrible. She'll never get married. No one's going to want to hang out with her because she'll be too weird. And that's what real shamans are like. When you see the what did I just say it was called? The werewolf movie, the Northman. When you see the Northman, you'll see a couple of shamans in there who they live alone. They're pretty much nuts, and they are heavy duty magical people, but they're not going to be, you know, they're not going to get married and have kids and live in a little house, you know.
Right.
So shamans in general it's a rough hoe. And in Guatemala, I got the guy who ended up being our guide who gave up on the itinerary and took us up into the mountains to meet shamans. Introduced me to like 20 of them. And I got to be part of a ceremony. I mean, I didn't do anything. They just blessed me, but they did their juju, and it was unbelievable. They all like went into a different form, and wind started spinning around the hut, and stuff started flying around. It was, these people had their shit together. I was like, amazing work. So.
Wow. I want to say good evening to Patsy, my good friend, who is a loyal follower here at IAPN Radio. So thank you for tuning in there, Patsy. And she's made the comment so that so interesting is doing this. I'm always learning something new, and this is something new that I never really knew about. So I'm, like you said, this book was, I'm glad it was sent to me because this is right down my alley. And I'm really happy to be able to have it. So, with that being said, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to be right back with more with Denny Sargent and more with Werewolf Magick and Werewolf Pack Magic. So, don't go nowhere.
Oh.
I just walked into this coffee shop. You'll never guess what I found. All the help is deeply engrossed in metaphysical times. You should too. I'm at the Egyptian, 475 Park Avenue in Idaho Falls, Idaho. You get your very own coffee for free, and we're open till 10.
Sister Moon, Apothecary and More is a collaboration of local island witches bringing you handcrafted tools for ritual, amazing apothecary, custom vinyl work, merchandise, and so much more. But we are not just an online store. We are a sisterhood, a platform, and a voice for everything that is magical. Join us for our famous Tarot Tuesdays from 11 to 4 Eastern Standard Time for a discounted reading with our amazing in-house intuitive reader and priestess, Wolf Spirit Energy, Beverly Oberlin. You can find us on Facebook at Sister Moon Store or on the web at sistermoon.shop. So fly on over and stop in for a spell.
We're here, and you're listening to Iowa Pagan News Radio.
You are listening to Pagan Artist Spotlight on the Prairie Land Radio Network and the Podbean Podcast Network.
All right, we are back with Denny Sargent and talking about Werewolf Pack Magic, Werewolf Magic, and this has been informational filled because I'm gonna definitely have to do a lot more research and because I do value the old ways. So there's a lot more information that I still need to learn yet. So this is all good information that not just myself, but everybody else should know about too.
Well, I think anybody who's at all interested in occult or esoteric practices should know about it because it's actually when I started looking into werewolf magic, I started looking into shamanic practices, and I started looking into how to weave this together in my own practice. I was shocked how much was out there, and it's not just wolves. I know in our Western culture, I've already talked about the fact that there were werewolf cults coming out of Indo-European werewolf cults. I just found out there were werewolf warrior cults in ancient Persia. I'm still amassing more data because I'm a crazy historian and I like this stuff. But all throughout the Western area, Roman and Greek and etc., it was wolves were the primary, wolves and bears were the primary shape-shifting. But that makes sense because they were the apex predators, especially wolves. So you go to other countries though, like I've been to Morocco, there it's were hyenas. And they're really serious about it. Like they believe there are a number of people, and especially iron workers, I swear, are part of this, that they can shapeshift into hyenas. In Asia, I lived in Japan for 4 years. Inari is a goddess. You see her shrines everywhere. Inari temples all have fox spirits in them, kitsune, and they truly believe, Japanese believe that there are certain people who can shift into foxes. And if you just do a quick search on, kitsune or fox shape-shifting in Japan, you're going to be inundated. There's other animals in Japan because Japan is essentially, Shinto is essentially a animistic religion, and I studied it there when I was there. I was there for 4 years, and I got to go to the Kokugakuen University and study about Shinto. I like all this stuff, right? And There are tanuki, which are like raccoon dogs, and there are cats, and there are other animals that people shapeshift into. And most Japanese, if you ask them, do you believe in werewolves? They'll say, oh yeah. And I'll say, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you think? And they say, oh, it's just certain people genetically are born with that and can shapeshift, and some can't. Now, this actually connects with the idea of shamanism, that certain people are born to be shamans. They're born with the ability to hear the animal spirits or an animal spirit, whatever comes to them, and go into, dive into the underworld and help people heal, do distance healing, do soul retrieval, all this stuff, which is really, by the way, having talked to Nadiaja about this, she says it's horrible. All of these things are horrible because you're exhausted for 3 or 4 days afterwards. You don't feel well. It drains your energy, and shamans don't live very long because it's a huge stress. This is exactly what some of the trial documents say about people shifting into werewolves, witches shifting to werewolves, that it took them 3 days to recover from these sorts of things. So something here is going on. There's all these things that are connecting. Like my number one goal, of course, was, okay, how can I do this? And it took me 4 years to figure out how to put together the pieces of that I could find and figure out how to do it, and then how to help other people do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that, like, this one has all the key stuff, and then the pack magic is because I started to get people. I have a group of people that we meet once every full moon, and we do it together. And what I realized was that when you have a group of people doing it, even in a small group, I just have a very small group, and I have woods in my backyard, and we just, like I said, we hope the cops don't come. We're just going to tell them we're LARPing. If that's our, we've worked it out, like, because we're like howling and like loudly. There's like, there's like 4 or 5 of us sometimes howling at the top of our lungs at night and under a full moon, and we'll just say no, it's a D&D LARPing thing. We're just going to tell them that.
Well, I got to admit that each year when the blood moon comes about, for some odd reason, I hit a very low point. It's like my emotions bottom out, and it for some reason or other, it just has an effect on me that I do my best to try to stay inside and avoid.
So in the book you have, it's the preview book. It's still got some typos and things that have to go in it. There is a ritual for the blood red moon. And the reason why I ended up writing it is because I experienced exactly what you're saying. And when I looked into it and did some research on it, it was a time of purification. So I wrote a werewolf purification ritual, and I've done it 3 or 4 times since at different blood moons, and it's been incredibly helpful. If you can look it up in the index, it's called like the red moon. Was that your dog?
Yeah.
Here's my dog. My dog's looking out the window.
Hey, laugh.
Oh, you hear that dog? There goes mine. There goes mine. He's running out in the backyard barking. He thinks your dog's out there. You know what? Every time I do an interview about werewolf magic, the dogs go crazy. It's just how it's gonna be. This is how it's gonna be.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she had to come out and put her 2 cents worth in. So
when I do the rituals, my dog is part of the pack. Like the first few times, he sat out and watched, like, what is going on. And then one time he just trotted to the circle and sat down, and he's been with us ever since. We go howling, he goes howling. We start doing dancing around. He starts doing. He's just decided once we shapeshift, to him, we're dogs. I mean, we're no longer who we were. And like I said, the first few times he was freaked out, and he's been with me long enough that he's like, "Oh God, it's the full moon. Denny's losing it again. I'm gonna hide. I'm gonna hide."
Yeah.
So I assume, I don't know, but obviously part of the shape-shifting thing in shamanic cultures and also in what I do can be enhanced and promoted with certain psychedelics. And
right.
Here where I live in Seattle, it's mushrooms are acceptable and essentially legal. They're decriminalized and soon they'll be legal. Lots and lots of places they are not, and neither is marijuana or other things. But there's my ducks sitting on the couch watching us. But in the historical traditional stuff I found, there was almost always some sort of psychoactive thing to help people break free of their mental human conditioning, I think. Very interesting stuff. I got into it because it's my own therapy. I mean, I was in a very bad place. I have the whole story in here in Werewolf Magick, how I cracked up and ran into the woods and ripped off all my clothes. And the great wolf spirit kept me alive and didn't, and I became initiated into that. I'm now, it's now my, now a tutelary deity or spirit that sticks with me and will be with me forever. But people do come to me, like you with you have a wolf spirit involved with you, and I'm drawing people all over like the internet who write me and say, I've had this connection with wolves, and I have had these experiences with wolves, I had one just write me and say, well, I'm really upset. I'm having a really hard time. What should I do? Like now I'm like the werewolf. I'm the werewolf, like, I don't know, counselor. And I always tell people the same thing. Stop what you're doing and go out into the woods.
Right.
Go into nature. Shut down your brain. Relax. Breathe. Do some pranayama. If you can, if you can without getting arrested, take off your clothes and your shoes and feel the ecosystem. And the most important thing that I got out of this whole thing is that when I am in a full shifted form, when I am fully, I don't grow fangs and fur and claws, more is the pity, but when I go into a full shift state and I am no longer who I am, I can feel and see the web of the ecosystem, and I am an animal within the ecosystem. And once you're an animal, the Gaia accepts you, the ecosystem totally accepts you, and you enter a completely different world. I mean, I do this at night in the woods, and I can see quite well. The only thing I tell people is you can take off all your clothes, but have a pair of shoes.
Right. Have a pair of shoes.
I have done the bad thing and hurt myself. But I got to a point where I was creeping up on raccoons. I was creeping up on deer. My senses were my night vision, my hearing, my smell became highly accentuated. Now you can argue, he was hallucinating and this is just what he's thinking is going on. But I literally walked around in the dead of night throughout the woods and never bumped into anything. And so, but it's really potent stuff. And once you actually have the wolf spirit within you, once your animal self takes over, all of a sudden nature is no longer afraid of you. And I've had, I was camping one time and I was in this state and deer walked right up to me and sniffed me. And I hung out with them for hours and, so the second this book that you have, I really began to think about the philosophy and the ideas behind what I was doing. And, we're destroying our planet. It's obvious. And apparently not much is going to be done about it. And Gaia will survive. Our planet will survive. The goddess that we all venerate will very likely survive, but will we? And I've come to realize that the thing that has destroyed our culture more than anything, and destroyed so much and brought all this catastrophe, is that we, especially in Judeo-Christian countries or monotheistic countries, we believe that we are not animals. We've been told our whole lives since we were kids we're not animals, and we use lots of negative things like "don't be an animal," you eat like an animal, or all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bible and the Quran and all these things say clearly, God is here. God made man, but animals don't have souls. So it's man gets to do whatever he wants with the planet. This is rote of pretty much all religions, most religions in the world. We are here. We have souls. Animals do not. They are just things. We can do anything we want with them. Nature is just a thing we can do anything we want with. Native Americans, other tribal cultures knew that was bullshit. Excuse my language.
Oh, yeah. I know that for a fact. Because basically all of us know that animals do have spirits. And that is something that has to be respected. My friend Patsy made a comment here saying that since the energy shifted, it's been effectiveness on our wild dogs outside. Normally she can hear them very far away, but last night she heard them on the back roads, and she's wondering if it was real.
Things I didn't used to think real. I mean, I do write books on the occult and magic and stuff, but things I used to not think are real, I now think are real. I mean, I've been able to, scare raccoons at night when I was in this state of consciousness, and I've met and hung out with shamans, and I've hung out with other people who are who do these sorts of things. And do I think it's real? Yeah, I mean, reality is fairly flexible, but are there people out there doing these things? Are there animals? And I mean, there was recently, I think, I don't remember where it was. I thought it was maybe Iowa. Somebody had a camera shot of what looked like a werewolf outside a zoo. And I thought, everybody's like, well, what is this? And I'm like, they call them dog man, they call them werewolf. But there's a thin line between our animalness and the animals out there.
Right.
And I honestly truly believe that, just like Chief Seattle said, and I quoted him in there, that if, Native Americans saw themselves as animals, fellow animals with the animals. They learned, at least from what I've been reading, they learned a lot from the animals. They learned what to eat, what not to eat, where to hunt, what not to hunt. Mm. And they were people. They called animals people. And the fact that we've lost it is why everything's completely gone haywire. When we shoot wolves from helicopters, we're not treating them like people. We're treating them like things. When we wipe out species because we want to build something, they're just things. We don't see them as part of us.
Right.
And I'm hoping that my books do something to help people understand. You have to wake up your own animal, and we are disconnected from Gaia. We are disconnected from nature. We buy our food wrapped in plastic. Most people have no connection with the natural world, or very, very little. They'll run out, go hiking, and run back, So the more animal we become, the more we open to our animal self and work with that, wolf, whatever it may be, the better it's going to be for our ecosystem and for the world. I mean, I'm getting on my high horse now, but I am, it just seems really, from my perspective, no, it seems super obvious that we have just pulled the plug from nature.
Right. Yeah. And essentially we have, and there's those of us who do respect nature, do respect all animals and animal spirits. It's up to us to educate everyone else that we need to be paying more attention. We need to be respecting nature and all animals around us for certain.
I think by becoming, like truly becoming an animal, by shape shifting, by moving into a pure animal consciousness, it has been the most shocking revelation to me that when I am in that state, I get it. Like I get the animals. I see the web of the weird and web of the ecosystem when I'm in the woods. The trees talk to me. The earth talks to me. I get omens directly from the wind. And I mean, once you're in that state of consciousness, you can't forget it. You can't come out of it and go, oh, animals, let's just get rid of them, you know?
Yep.
So I'm hoping.
Now we've got a question here. Patsy wants to know, how do you expect to shift your instinctual primal feelings these coming days?
Oh, well, that's a good one. Actually, Werewolf Magick was published in the middle of the pandemic, and I think that's one reason why it sold so well. Because I don't know if you know, but on Facebook, there's a group that has like 10,000 people called Howl at 8 p.m. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, yeah. It was huge. It's still huge if you go looking for it. Howl at 8 p.m.
Huh.
So people, the idea was that everybody who was just losing it at 8 p.m., which is wherever they were, would stick their head out their apartment window and just howl at 8 p.m. And if you look through it, there were places, especially urban places, where there'd be, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people all howling at 8 p.m. And I thought, you know, I don't have to try to do any of this. Like this is happening. People are popping, you know, and the pandemic really gave everybody a chance to sit and think about how screwed up things are and how disconnected from nature we are. And we are animals and we don't know how to deal with it, which, you know, because animals live in nature and
right.
And we're monkeys, we're primates, and we're not the nicest animals. So.
That's true. Okay, now let's see. William Hegman, who is another author who joined me on my show here not too long ago, he said, yes, an honest relationship with the world, the environment, and being part of it.
Well, I think being part of it is the key thing. Like, that's the problem. A lot of people, I mean, I'm an environmentalist. I've been giving money to the environmental movements. I especially, by the way, want to promote Defenders of Wildlife. They're doing more to help wolves than almost any other group. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I have been involved. I've been hiking. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I love nature. But it was all, it's all, a lot of it's been filtered through my human intellect, because a lot of what happens in my brain doesn't happen in animal brains, right? It wasn't until I was able to shut it down and just sort of move right into being a pure animal that it made true sense to me. Mm-hmm. So this is what I say to everybody. I say, get my book. If you can't afford it, I'll talk to me and we'll work something out. I've got PDFs I can send to people. And I do. Some people are just like, I don't have the money, and this calls to me. I'm like, here, I don't care. And this is more of a mission for me than anything else. Mm-hmm. But if you like go through this and start paying attention to it and looking at it and finding ways to shut down your upper cortex and let your hidden, chained, terribly misunderstood animal self, let it come out and look through those eyes, then all of this makes, then all of a sudden you don't have to think about it. We think everything, you're there. You're there. You go into the woods and you're like, oh.
All right. We've got about 5 minutes left, and William made a comment, said, I have to keep it toned down, because when he's howling, he scares the neighbors.
True. I know that story. I scare the neighbors too, and the punchline of that is that I live, I live in Seattle, but I happen to have some woods. But we have a ordinance. You can't be really loud after 11 p.m. So I just don't do anything after 11 p.m. And but I had neighbors come by and they said, "Oh, did you hear about the coyotes?" And I said, "No, we have coyotes again, because we used to have them a lot around here." You go, "Yeah, they only show up on the full moon. It's really weird." And I was like, "Oh wow, that is weird." And then I suddenly realized, "Oh my God, I'm the coyote."
Talking about you guys.
I told my friends, they're like, "Oh my God, we're the coyotes." I go, "No, well, that's good."
Nice.
At least we're doing some fun. Yeah, you can do it inside. You can do some of these practices inside. It's always, of course, 100% better to be out in the woods. But I assume there's places to go camping. I'm assuming there's lots of places in your area. But on the other hand, part of me just doesn't care. Like if I'm howling at 10 o'clock at night, and if I'm scaring the neighbors, it's like, I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, I could be a dog. If somebody asks me, I talk to them about it. But by the way, there's I'm involved in about 10 Facebook groups that are just about werewolves.
Nice.
Hundreds, thousands of people. This is not just you and me having this thing about wolf spirits. There's like, especially around now, it seems to be uprising. There are thousands of people who are having the same experience. And that's pretty cool.
I agree with you. Okay, now, within the last 4 minutes that we've got here, I've got basically, you can find his books on Llewellyn at llewellyn.com under Denny Sargent, where you can find the majority of his books, and then also on Amazon.
Right.
You can find his books there as well. And then especially the Wolf Magick, you can also find that on your main website at dennysargentauthor.com. I
recommend getting Werewolf Magick first and the Werewolf Pack Magick second. The Werewolf Pack Magick is a grimoire. It's a book of shadows. It's a book of shadows that's essentially like any Coven book of shadows. But because I started doing it with groups and I wanted a book of rituals for groups. But this book is like the first one, and it's still selling well on through Amazon and thrift books and Barnes and Noble and a bunch of others. So
nice.
And I can be contacted through my website, werewolfmagic.com, magic with a K. If anybody wants to, they can find me, and I'm always happy to respond. And on Facebook, I'm Denny Sargent Author. So if anybody wants to talk to me, people are always shocked that I write back, but I love talking to people about this.
Nice. Well, I'm happy to have you around, and I'm definitely going to be staying in contact with you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. And it's wonderful to meet a fellow wolf spirit. So it's always a joy.
It's an honor, brother. All right. You've been listening to another edition of Iowa Pagan News and Pagan Artist Spotlight on the Prairie Land Radio Network. And as always, if you have questions for me directly, email me at earl@iapnradio.net or at iowapagannews@gmail.com. And if you have not joined up with the group for IAPN Radio, why not? It's totally free. Come join us, and you'll be able to keep up to date as to what we've got going on here at IAPN Radio. You can also take a look at the business page as well. I invite everyone to take a look at that. And over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be dedicating my efforts here to support all authors at Llewellyn. So over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be interviewing a lot of authors, especially with Llewellyn Con going on right now. Right. That's featuring 40 different authors over a 10-day period. This has been going on since Monday, and there's been a lot of great stuff going on at Llewellyn Con. So if you've not tuned into that yet, be sure to check it out.
Can I add one more thing? If I'm
Sure, go ahead.
going to be one of the headliners at Starwood, and I'm going to hold a huge Werewolf Magick bonfire stone circle full moon midnight gathering. So if anybody's around and they want to really get wild,
Yeah.
What?
And my friend Brian Henke, who's going to be playing at Starwood, he's been trying to convince me to go too. So it's like,
come. We'll hang out. You can see me walk everybody through the initial shape-shifting stuff right away. I'm really excited about it. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. This has been a really good time, and like I said, I'm definitely going to be staying in touch with you. So I want to say pleasant journeys, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good weekend coming up, and enjoy. Pleasant journeys, everyone. Have a great night, and we are going to be out of here for the night.
Thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. All shows are recorded and available for download at plrdn.podbean.com. All rights are reserved and may not be replayed without written permission by IAPN Radio Management. Come join us at our new group, IAPN Radio on Facebook, where you can be kept up to date for future broadcasts. Pleasant journeys, everyone.